Thank you. I'm so glad you could make it.
I saw her before she saw me. Sophia, radiant in a white designer gown, laughing with her new husband, Greg, in front of a sea of champagne glasses and sparkling lights. My chest tightened. Every laugh she let out felt like a blade carving into me. She didn't notice me yet, but I noticed her. Always had. Always will, maybe. She had this way of commanding attention without even trying. And tonight, she was the queen of a world I wasn't allowed into. I couldn't help but remember the nights we spent dreaming together, dreaming about the future she always promised. And yet here she was, flaunting her perfect life, her perfect husband, as if the past few years of my struggle didn't exist. I felt the familiar sting of betrayal. Not just because she married someone rich, but because she seemed to be mocking me silently, intentionally. Like my absence was the punchline. A voice broke my thoughts. Hey. I didn't expect to see you here. It was Jason, our mutual friend, fumbling with his champagne glass. Weren't you invited? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He laughed awkwardly, glancing at the glittering crowd. Well, this is more of a private family thing. VIP only, I guess. I forced a smile, but inside, my jaw clenched. VIP only. That's what she considered me now, a nobody. I see. I let my eyes wander back to her. Sophia's laughter cut through the air like music I once loved but could never hear again without wincing. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her. And it wasn't just happiness, it was superiority. She wanted everyone to know she had one, while I had nothing. I remembered how she used to tease me, subtly, every time I mentioned a project I was working on. How she'd roll her eyes when I said I wanted to start my own company. That's cute, she'd say. Dream big, little man. I swallowed the bitter lump in my throat, recalling the countless nights I spent turning her words into fuel. And now, it seemed that fuel was going to ignite a fire she would regret. Jason shifted nervously. So, how've you been? He asked. Surviving, I said, letting my gaze linger on Sophia one last time before looking away. I didn't want to give him my pity story. Not tonight. I needed my head clear. If she thought this wedding, this display of wealth, would break me, she was about to learn she had underestimated me. My mind raced. Every glance, every laugh of hers, was now a challenge. She thought I was beneath her, a failure wandering outside her new perfect life. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. And one day, she'd remember this night, not as a victory, but as the moment she underestimated me for the last time. A soft bell rang from somewhere inside the hall, pulling my attention back. Sophia turned slightly and smiled at someone in the crowd, completely unaware I was standing there, watching. Her arrogance made my blood boil, but it also made my purpose clear. This wasn't just about love lost. This was about justice. This was about proving, finally, that I was not a man to be mocked, ignored, or dismissed. I turned on my heel, my mind already forming the plans I would execute. The world she was flaunting wasn't untouchable. And I intended to touch it. Slowly, carefully. She had humiliated me publicly, but now the game had changed. And I would win. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I found myself walking the empty streets, letting the city lights wash over me. Every laugh, every sparkle at Sophia's wedding replayed in my head, like a cruel loop. But unlike before, this time I didn't feel broken. Not completely. I felt fueled. Angry, yes, but in a way that sharpened my mind. Pain had a way of focusing me, and I wasn't about to waste it. I met Ethan at our usual coffee shop the next morning. He was already there, laptop open, scribbling numbers and charts like a man possessed. Finally, he said, glancing up when I slid into the chair across from him. I was starting to think you bailed on me after last night. I was busy, I said, keeping my voice casual. My mind was already racing. Busy thinking. Ethan raised an eyebrow. About what exactly? About her. I didn't even bother saying Sophia's name, it was enough that he knew. About what she thinks she's done to me. About how I'll fix it. Ethan smirked. Fix it? Or get revenge? Both, I said, leaning forward. I'm not just going to sit and watch her flaunt everything while I struggle in the shadows. I've been underestimated my whole life, Ethan. And she's just the latest example. He closed his laptop slowly. All right. Spill it. What's the plan? I told him about what I'd been researching, Greg's company. A billion-dollar empire, run by a man completely blind to its weaknesses. And most importantly, blind to me. I had ways to get in without anyone realizing who I was. Every loophole, every opportunity, I had noted down over the past months. The thrill of it made my chest tighten. You really think you can pull this off? Ethan asked. His tone was cautious, but I caught that glint of excitement in his eyes, the same one I felt. I don't think, I said firmly. I know. I've been preparing for this for years. She made me believe I was nothing. That was her mistake. Ethan nodded slowly. Then I'm in. But you know the risk, right? One wrong move. I waved him off. I've learned from every mistake I've made. This time, I'm untouchable. Or at least, they won't see me coming. We spent the morning mapping it out, talking numbers, alliances, corporate loopholes. I introduced him to a few key names I'd been quietly researching: Linda, a sharp lawyer with a reputation for loyalty to those she trusts, and Marcus, an ambitious executive who loves playing both sides. Both would be crucial pieces in my plan, whether they realized it or not. The more I spoke, the more my vision came alive. This wasn't just about Sophia anymore. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of outsmarting anyone. That I wasn't the man she left behind, the one who accepted humiliation silently. Ethan leaned back, a grin spreading across his face. You've got that fire, man. The kind that either builds empires or burns them down. Good, I said, my eyes glinting. Because I'm planning to do a little of both. Later that day, I sat alone in my apartment, going over the details again. I remembered the nights Sophia mocked my ambition, the casual way she dismissed my dreams. Funny thing is, she thought I'd forgotten. She thought I'd moved on. But I hadn't. I never moved on. I just grew stronger. And now, I had the chance to prove it. I allowed myself a small smile. She might be celebrating her life tonight, thinking she's untouchable, but I was already steps ahead. She didn't see it coming, and neither did her husband. I closed my notebook and looked out the window. The city stretched endlessly, a playground of opportunity and deception. Every light was a challenge, every shadow a secret I could use. Tomorrow, the rail work begins. And Sophia, she won't know what hit her. It started with a phone call I had waited months to make. Hello, this is Adrian. I'm calling regarding a potential investment in Greg Industries, I said, my voice calm, professional, completely unlike the mess of emotions I felt when I saw Sophia laughing at her wedding. The voice on the other end was clipped, polite, yet slightly skeptical. We're aware of interested parties. Can you submit a formal proposal? I smiled to myself. That was exactly what I wanted. Of course. I'll have my team send over all necessary documents within the week. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, letting the thrill sink in. This was my first move. Small, subtle, almost invisible. But it was enough to start tipping the scales. Greg would never suspect that the quiet guy he brushed off years ago, Sophia's ex, was about to become one of the most influential forces in his empire. Later that week, Ethan and I went over the numbers. We're in, he said, pointing at the projections. If the board approves this, you'll have influence without anyone knowing it's you. I nodded, feeling the weight of it. Influence, unseen power, it was intoxicating. But I had to be careful. Too fast, and she might notice. Too slow, and she'd gloat all over my face while I watched helplessly. The first board meeting I attended was a masquerade of civility. Marcus, the ambitious executive I had quietly researched, eyed me suspiciously. I don't think we've met, he said, a faint smile masking his curiosity. Adrian, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. Looking forward to working with you. He chuckled politely, but there was tension behind his eyes. He didn't know yet that every suggestion he made, every small decision, could be nudged in the direction I wanted. I was a ghost in the room, influencing the conversation, dropping subtle comments that would later ripple through the company. Meanwhile, Sophia continued to flaunt her life. Social media posts, charity galas, luxury vacations, every day, a new reminder of what she thought I had lost. And every day, it fueled me. I replayed her wedding laughter in my mind, her smug glance when someone mentioned my failure. She had no idea I was moving pieces on her very own chessboard. Ethan leaned over one evening as we reviewed Greg Industries' quarterly reports. You're serious about this, huh? I've never been more serious, I said. Every dollar, every decision, it's all part of the plan. She won't see it coming until it's too late. That night, I found myself walking past Sophia's favorite cafe. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I just watched from across the street as she sipped her latte, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of the storm I was quietly brewing. A pang of old feelings hit me, a mixture of sadness and anger, but I swallowed it. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about justice. Karma. I started receiving reports from Linda, the lawyer I had brought on quietly. Her messages were short, precise, updates on Greg Industries' vulnerabilities, suggestions on how to leverage certain contracts, even insider information about board members' tendencies. It was perfect. Every small action I took nudged the company toward a state where I could gain influence without exposing myself. One evening, Marcus cornered me outside the elevator. You seem awfully interested in the board's internal politics, he said, smirking. I smiled faintly, leaning against the wall. Curiosity keeps me sharp, I said. Besides, I like knowing where things are headed. He raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Not yet. I watched the empire from the shadows, a ghost controlling movements few would ever notice. Sophia's world, so bright and untouchable, was already bending under my subtle influence. And it thrilled me. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, focused, powerful, unstoppable. I went home that night, exhausted but exhilarated. I sat in my apartment, staring at the skyline. Each light in the city reminded me that patience was part of the plan. She thought she had one, but she was about to learn that what we see isn't always what controls the world. I had set the first domino, and soon, every move she made would push her closer to the edge, closer to realizing who really held the strings. Tomorrow, I thought, sipping my coffee, I make my next move. And by the time she notices, it will be too late. I started noticing the small things first. Reports came in late. Numbers didn't add up the way they used to. Greg made decisions that seemed fine on the surface, but I could see the subtle cracks forming. Every misplaced invoice, every poorly timed shipment, was a domino I had tipped just slightly. Not enough for anyone to notice yet, but enough for the future. Ethan and I sat in my office, the city lights casting shadows across our plans. "It's working," he said quietly, tapping his finger against the table. "Greg doesn't suspect a thing. Every move you've suggested has nudged the company in your favor." I nodded, staring at the projections on my laptop. "It has to look organic." "If he notices even the smallest pattern," I trailed off, letting the thought hang. "That's why Marcus is dangerous," Ethan said. "He's already suspicious. One wrong step, and he might start digging." I leaned back, smiling faintly. "Let him dig. He'll only dig himself deeper." That afternoon, I watched Sophia post another picture on social media, another glamorous shot, another toast to her perfect life. My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to confront her, to scream at her for all the years of humiliation. But I didn't. I let her arrogance blind her. Let her think she was untouchable. The more she flaunted, the more satisfying her fall would be. Linda called later with updates. "Greg just approved the Jensen contract," she said, her tone professional. "It's not ideal. It'll look like a win for him, but the financials are off. You'll see the impact in the next quarter." I smirked. Perfect. Let him feel smart. Let her watch him feel smart. As the days passed, cracks in the empire grew. Greg began to rely more on Marcus, who, despite his ambition, had a blind spot that I exploited. I suggested tweaks, delays, and slight alterations through the back channels Linda set up. It was like pulling strings in a puppet show. And the best part? None of them knew who was behind it. One evening, Marcus cornered me again in the boardroom. "You're involved in more than you let on, aren't you?" he asked, leaning casually against the table. I gave him a faint, polite smile. "I'm just a concerned investor, Marcus." "Isn't that what everyone wants?" His eyes narrowed, and I could see the suspicion forming. But it wasn't strong enough yet. Not yet. Patience was my weapon. Meanwhile, Sophia's obliviousness was almost comical. She boasted about her husband's unshakable business instincts at a gala, laughing as if the world were hers. I kept my distance, listening from across the room while sipping my drink. Every laugh, every toast, felt like fuel. Later that night, Ethan and I debriefed. "She's still blind, huh?" he asked. "Completely," I said, leaning back in my chair. "That's why this is going to be so satisfying. She thinks she's untouchable, but the foundation she's standing on is crumbling." Ethan smirked. "And Greg? He has no idea?" I shook my head. "Not a clue. But he will. Slowly. And when he does, he'll realize too late that the empire he thought he controlled never really belonged to him." I went home that night exhausted but exhilarated. I replayed every board meeting, every conversation, every subtle suggestion I had made. The cracks were growing. Sophia's confidence, Greg's pride, they were all about to meet reality. I paused by the window, looking out at the city below. Each light seemed to pulse with possibility. Each shadow held a secret I could use. The plan was working, the empire was bending, and I was still invisible. And for the first time in years, I felt unstoppable. I saw her across the lobby before she saw me. Sophia, in another flawless outfit, laughing at some joke I couldn't hear. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't just anger or heartbreak, it was control. Power. I had waited years for this moment, and now it was finally here. I adjusted my tie, trying to calm the rush of adrenaline, and approached her casually. "Sophia," I said, letting my voice carry just enough surprise. She turned, her smile faltering for a split second before she replaced it with her usual practiced charm. "Adrian? What are you doing here?" I leaned against the edge of the reception desk, letting my gaze linger. "Oh, just handling some business. Greg's company, actually. You know, things have changed since the last time we spoke." Her eyebrows rose, curiosity mixed with suspicion. "Business? I don't understand." I smiled faintly, enjoying the flicker of unease. "I'm a stakeholder now." Quietly. Her lips parted, but she didn't say anything. Shock. That was good. I let her stew in it. "You, what?" she finally managed, voice tight. "Let's just say the empire you've been flaunting isn't as untouchable as you think," I said calmly, every word deliberate. Funny how quickly things can shift when the overlooked person finally gets noticed. Her eyes narrowed, searching mine for some hint that I was bluffing. But I wasn't. Not at all. "Adrian, this isn't possible. Greg would never." "Would never what?" I interrupted gently. "Notice me? Trust me? I think Greg's company has been run by blind luck for a long time. But luck only lasts so long." She stepped back, a mixture of fear and fury in her eyes. You've been behind everything?" I let out a soft laugh, the sound low and controlled. "Everything that's been happening in the company. The cracks you've noticed? The missteps Greg's made? All of them. Subtle, careful, invisible. And now, you see me. Finally." Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she touched her necklace, like a lifeline. "Adrian, why are you doing this? Is this revenge?" I studied her for a moment, the woman I once loved, now a stranger filled with arrogance and entitlement. "It's not just revenge," I said slowly. "It's justice. You mocked me, dismissed me, flaunted your wealth while I struggled. I've been patient, Sophia. But patience has limits. And now, the scales are tipping." Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. I didn't think you'd rise like this. I thought I left you behind." "You did," I admitted. "And I learned. I grew. I waited. And now, you get to watch the consequences unfold. Slowly. Elegantly. Just like a lesson you should have learned years ago." She shook her head, panic and disbelief warring on her face. You can't just control everything, you." "Watch me," I said, cutting her off gently. "Because from now on, every decision you made thinking it was untouchable, every smug smile, every laugh at my expense, will be reflected back to you. Slowly. Surely. And there's nothing you can do to stop it." Her hands clenched into fists, her carefully cultivated composure cracking. This isn't fair." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to almost a whisper. Life rarely is. That's the beauty of it. But don't worry. You'll see why I was never the one to underestimate. Not anymore. She stared at me for a long moment, eyes wide, chest heaving. I could see the arrogance cracking, the social superiority faltering. She was beginning to understand, and it was intoxicating. Finally, I turned away, leaving her standing in the lobby, powerless and panicked. Each step I took felt like victory, each glance back a reminder that she had underestimated me for the last time. Outside, I inhaled the cool night air, letting the adrenaline settle. The confrontation had been perfect, controlled, subtle, and devastating. I had given her the first taste of the reality she would soon face fully. And deep down, a small part of me smiled. Not just for revenge, but for closure. The woman who mocked me, who thought she had left me behind, now knew that I was never someone to be dismissed. The first real signs of trouble came quietly, almost imperceptibly. Greg called me one morning, frustration creeping into his voice. Adrian, have you seen the Jensen contract numbers? Something's off. Profits are down, timelines delayed. I don't understand it. I smiled behind the phone, keeping my tone neutral. I noticed the same discrepancies. It could be a supplier error, or perhaps a miscommunication with the board. But don't worry, I'm already reviewing it and suggesting corrections. He exhaled, relief evident in his voice. Thanks. I guess I was overthinking it. Overthinking. That was exactly the word I wanted him to use. Meanwhile, Sophia's arrogance remained unchecked. She posted another Instagram story that night, champagne in hand, smiling at a life she thought was untouchable. I clenched my fists slightly, savoring the irony. She had no idea how fragile her world had become. Every smug post, every confident laugh, was a reminder of how far ahead I already was. Linda's messages pinged later that afternoon. Greg just approved the Jensen amendments, delays and miscalculations fully in effect. Sophia is going to notice the drop in quarterly performance soon. Perfect. Later, I arrived at a board meeting under the guise of routine consultation. Marcus was already there, tapping impatiently on the table. Adrian, you've been unusually involved in these internal numbers lately, he said, suspicious, but his tone carried less accusation and more curiosity. I gave him a calm smile. Just trying to help. Sometimes the smallest oversight can snowball into a big issue. I prefer to catch them early. He narrowed his eyes but didn't push further. Not yet. The meeting ended with Greg thanking me personally, praising my insight. I don't know what I'd do without you, he said, genuinely appreciative. My lips curved into a subtle smile. Yes. Watch him feel smart. Watch her admire his supposed control. And watch them both fall. Sophia called later that night, her tone sharp, brittle with frustration. Adrian, something's happening with the company. Greg, profits are slipping, timelines aren't being met. What are you doing? I let a pause linger, just long enough to make her panic bubble beneath the surface. I'm doing exactly what I promised, Sophia. Guiding the company through the cracks you never noticed. But some things are out of our control. What do you mean? She hissed. Life, I said softly. Sometimes the people who think they're untouchable realize too late that they aren't. You'll understand soon enough. Her silence on the line was satisfying. She had no idea the storm was just beginning. Over the next few days, I watched the dominoes fall. Greg made confident decisions that backfired spectacularly, subtly guided by the small suggestions I'd planted earlier. Marcus, eager to prove himself, miscalculated yet again, falling into traps I set months before. And Sophia? She grew restless, posting less, smiling less, her arrogance cracking as rumors of declining profits began circulating among her social circle. Ethan and I debriefed one evening. "She's starting to realize it," he said quietly, eyes gleaming. "She's noticing the cracks. Soon, she'll panic." I nodded, feeling the thrill rise in my chest. Good. Let her. Let her feel the weight of underestimating me. Every day, she thinks she's untouchable, and every day, she's losing more ground. We watched the reports together, each number a victory, each misstep a reminder that control was now firmly in my hands. The once perfect facade of Sophia's life was fraying, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. That night, I walked past her favorite cafe again, letting her world play out like a movie in my mind. She sat inside, her posture slightly tense, phone in hand, scrolling through what I knew were company updates. Her face betrayed panic, though she tried to mask it with composure. I let out a slow breath, savoring the satisfaction. The fall had begun. And this time, there would be no recovery. Finally, I returned to my apartment and looked out at the city lights. Each illuminated window was a reminder that patience, strategy, and subtlety were far more powerful than arrogance or wealth. Sophia had mocked me once, dismissed me once, but now, she would watch as her carefully curated life began to crumble. And I would be there, unseen, orchestrating every step. I had been waiting for this moment for years, and now, finally, it had arrived. I saw Sophia enter the conference room, her posture rigid, eyes scanning the crowd as if she were still the queen of the world. She didn't notice me at first, my seat was tucked in the corner, shadows hiding my presence, but the moment she saw me, her face went pale. "Adrian," she breathed, disbelief written across every line of her face. I smiled faintly, calm and controlled. "Sophia. I'm glad you could join us today." She swallowed hard, fumbling with her notes. What are you doing here?" I thought. You thought this was still your empire?" I interrupted gently. "You thought Greg was the one running things? That everything you flaunted was safe?" Her lips trembled. I don't understand." I leaned forward, letting the silence stretch, letting the tension build. "It's simple, actually. Every decision, every misstep you noticed, every tiny crack that made you nervous, that wasn't luck. That wasn't Greg's fault. That was me." Her eyes widened, disbelief turning into panic. "You, what?" "I'm in control, Sophia," I said, letting the words sink in slowly. "Greg's company? That empire you married into? I own more than you ever realized. Every contract, every move, every calculation, I've been guiding it all." She stumbled back, nearly dropping her notes. "That's impossible. You can't." "Greg would never." "Would never what?" I asked softly, leaning back in my chair. "Notice me? Respect me? Take me seriously?" Funny thing is, he didn't. Not until I gave him the illusion of control. "And you," I paused, letting a small, satisfied smile creep onto my face, "you mocked me. You flaunted your wealth while I struggled. You thought I'd always be beneath you." Her hands trembled, fingers clutching at the edge of the table. I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" I pressed. "That underestimating someone has consequences? That mocking someone has repercussions?" That the person you left behind can rise while you sit in blind arrogance? Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You've ruined everything, she whispered, voice cracking. Why are you doing this? I studied her, the woman I once loved, the one who had destroyed me with a casual word, a dismissive glance. This isn't about hate anymore. It's about justice. Karma. Every laugh you gave while thinking you were untouchable, it's coming back. Slowly. Elegantly. In ways you never imagined. She shook her head, panic overtaking composure. Adrian, please, you can't. I made mistakes, but this isn't fair. I stood, walking toward the window, letting the city lights reflect off my eyes. Life rarely is fair, Sophia. But that's not my problem. This is the world you created for yourself, full of arrogance, blind to the people you hurt. And now, you get to watch it crumble while I remain unbroken. She sat down heavily, defeated, for the first time in years stripped of her confidence. Her empire, her life of social power, was unraveling, and she knew it. Every move she made, every decision she thought would protect her, had been influenced, controlled, and redirected by me. You were behind it all? Greg's voice cut in, finally realizing something was off. His expression was a mix of shock and betrayal. I didn't answer immediately. I let him sit in that realization. Yes, I said at last, calm, precise. Everything you thought was secure, everything you thought was yours. I've been guiding it, shaping it, quietly influencing the empire. And now, it's mine, at least more than you realize. Greg's face paled. Sophia gasped, disbelief turning to horror. This can't be happening. I shrugged slightly, letting the weight of my presence fill the room. It is happening. And it will continue to happen. Slowly. Surely. Every smug smile, every arrogant word, every time you thought you had control, it's over. And there's nothing either of you can do to stop it. Sophia's hands fell to her lap. Her perfect composure, her confidence, her social superiority, shattered. She finally understood. The woman who had mocked me, who had flaunted her life while I struggled, was powerless. I took a deep breath, feeling a calm satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. You wanted to see me fail? You wanted me beneath you? Funny thing is, I was never beneath you. I just had to wait. Her lips quivered, tears threatening now, but no words came. All the arrogance, all the pride, had drained away. The realization was complete, she had lost. I stepped back, letting silence speak louder than any words. This was the moment I had waited for, the moment where the balance shifted. Where she realized that underestimating someone is dangerous, where the scales of justice finally leveled. And as I walked out of that room, leaving her and Greg behind, I felt something I hadn't expected, closure. Not revenge for revenge's sake, not cruelty, but satisfaction, calm, and the knowledge that I had risen while those who mocked me had finally fallen. Sophia would remember this day forever. And for the first time in years, I felt truly untouchable. I watched from my office as the world I had once envied began to crumble around Sophia. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had spent years flaunting her wealth, her social status, and her perfect life while mocking me. Now, she was powerless, stripped of the image she had so carefully curated. And I was finally free. Greg was the first to realize the depth of his miscalculations. I received a panicked call from him one morning. Adrian, I don't understand. Every decision I make, the results are worse than expected. What's happening? I leaned back in my chair, letting a slow smile creep across my face. Perhaps it's just a matter of experience, Greg. Some lessons are harder to learn than others. Experience, he echoed, disbelief coating every word. I thought I was in control. You thought, I said softly, letting the weight of that word hang between us, but control isn't always what it seems. Meanwhile, Sophia's social circle had begun whispering. Friends who once hung on her every word now kept distance, sensing the shift in her aura. Invitations dwindled. Charity galas were replaced with meetings she wasn't invited to. And for the first time in years, she felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly insignificant. I received a message from Linda, quarterly numbers officially dropped. Media chatter about Greg's poor leadership is spreading. Sophia's influence is collapsing. Perfect. That evening, Sophia called me, desperation in her voice. Adrian, please. I need you to fix this. I can't. I can't handle it. I took a deep breath, letting the tension linger. I'm not here to fix what you broke. That's your responsibility. I simply set the pieces in motion. Every mistake you made, every arrogant move you thought harmless, it's all unfolding now. Her silence on the line was deafening. I could almost hear the panic building, the fear she tried so hard to hide. You think this is cruel, I continued softly, but it's nothing compared to the cruelty of underestimating someone. And now, you see it clearly. Karma is exacting its toll. She hung up without another word. I didn't need to hear anything else. I knew the damage was done. The following weeks were poetic. Greg's company continued to falter in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, each misstep engineered through the influence I had planted. Marcus, once suspicious, was now too entangled in his own errors to intervene. And Sophia? She became a shadow of her former self, her arrogance replaced with quiet panic, her confidence chipped away at every turn. Ethan and I sat together one night, reviewing the reports and the latest news coverage. She finally realizes, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. All that confidence, all that pride, gone. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. Not satisfaction in the cruelty itself, but in the justice of it. Years of mockery, humiliation, and being underestimated had led to this moment. And it was worth every sleepless night, every calculation, every subtle move. A week later, I saw Sophia at a small business networking event, her posture stiff, her smile forced. She tried to engage, tried to project authority, but everyone could sense the shift. The whispers followed her, eyes lingering on her with judgment. She caught my gaze across the room, and for the first time in years, she did not smile. She froze, panic and recognition mingling in her expression. I allowed myself a small smile. Not out of cruelty, but out of closure. She had mocked me publicly, thinking I would never rise, never achieve, never strike back. Now, she knew. The world she had built on arrogance and superficiality had been quietly undermined, and she couldn't stop it. I reflected on the journey that brought me here. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the long nights of planning, they had all shaped me. I had grown stronger, smarter, and wiser. I had risen while those who once looked down on me had fallen. And in that, there was a kind of peace. Ethan raised his glass in a quiet toast. To patience, he said. And to justice, I added, clinking mine against his. As I watched the city lights flicker beyond the window, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't just about hurting someone else. It was about proving to myself that I could overcome humiliation, rise from betrayal, and claim control over my own life. Sophia had been a catalyst, but the real victory was mine. And for the first time in years, I felt untouchable. The city felt different now. Quieter, sharper, as if the chaos I had orchestrated had finally settled into order. Greg Industries stabilized, now running smoothly under careful guidance, and Sophia, well, she was no longer untouchable. But strangely, the emptiness of her social empire didn't feel like victory anymore. It was a lesson I carried, a reminder of the life I had fought to reclaim. Ethan and I met at our usual rooftop cafe, the city lights flickering beneath us. "So," he said, sipping his coffee, "you actually did it. You went from nothing to controlling everything, and she never saw it coming." I leaned back, letting the warmth of the night settle over me. I did what I had to. But it wasn't just about her. Or Greg. Or even Marcus. It was about me. About proving I could rise above humiliation, above betrayal, and take control of my own life. Ethan nodded slowly. "You're different now. More focused. More untouchable, I guess." I smiled faintly, thinking about the long nights, the planning, the subtle manipulations. Yeah, untouchable. But it's also lonely. Funny, isn't it? I fought so hard to reclaim my power, yet now I realize the things I lost along the way can't be replaced. "Like what?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Time," I admitted. Time I spent obsessing, planning, thinking about revenge. Friendships strained. Nights I couldn't sleep. Relationships I couldn't invest in because I was consumed with proving something to someone else. Ethan leaned back, contemplative. "So, worth it?" I looked out over the skyline, lights reflecting in the water below. "Yes. But not in the way you'd think. I gained power and control, yes. Sophia learned her lesson, Greg learned his limits, and I finally proved that I could rise. But the real victory is that I've learned my own strength. That I don't need to be validated by others. That I can survive betrayal, heartbreak, and mockery, and come out stronger." Our conversation was interrupted by a ping on my phone. Linda, as always, updating me on the company's ongoing operations. I read her message silently, noting the steady progress and smooth recovery. The empire was running perfectly, invisible hands guiding it from the shadows. I had achieved what I wanted without chaos spilling over further than necessary. Sophia called later that evening. I let it ring, staring out the window. Eventually, she left a message, "Adrian. I realize now. I see everything. I'm sorry. I never thought it would end like this." I didn't respond immediately. I let the message sit. For years, I would have called her immediately, fueled by anger or nostalgia. But now, I didn't need to. Her words were acknowledgement enough, and that was all I required. Later, I texted her a single line: learn. Grow. Move forward. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't vengeance, it was finality. She had seen the consequences of underestimating me. She had faced the collapse of her arrogance. And now, it was time for both of us to move on in our own ways. Ethan leaned over as I put down my phone. "So, what's next?" he asked. I shrugged. Life. Building something for myself this time. Not for revenge, not for proving anything to anyone else. Just me. And maybe, one day, teaching someone else the lesson I had to learn the hard way. He laughed softly. "Sounds like a plan." I looked out at the city again, the lights shimmering in a reflection of glass and steel. For years, I had felt small, unseen, underestimated. Now, I was bigger, stronger, wiser. Untouchable, yes, but tempered by experience, by heartbreak, and by the realization that true strength comes from growth, not just power. As the night deepened, I realized something important. Revenge was satisfying, but it was the lessons beneath it, the resilience, the patience, the understanding of my own worth, that mattered most. And for the first time in years, I could breathe freely, knowing I had finally reclaimed my life, my power, and my peace. Sophia, Greg, Marcus, they had learned their lessons, and I had learned mine. The world was still chaotic, still unpredictable. But I had become someone who could navigate it. Someone who could survive betrayal, heartbreak, and manipulation, and emerge unbroken. And that was everything.